Hey, I'm Dave Brzozowski, the Racing Manager for Wilwood Disc Brakes, and we're here to talk about our Tru-Bar brake pedal assembly and the correct installation and maybe a couple of its advantages over a traditional balance bar. So our Tru-Bar system utilizes a trunnion balance system in the beam of the pedal as opposed to a monoball, which we will get into later. But the unique aspect of this particular system is its accuracy and its consistency for controlling the brake balance front to rear, meaning that you virtually get zero migration through the course of your on-track activities. The biggest difference with these when you do get one is that it works, I'll call the term backwards, in the fact that if you had a traditional balance bar system, the master cylinders would be opposite than what they are on this one, meaning that this system here, when it's adjusted, the rod end that's getting closer to the beam is the one that's getting the most pressure. With the other style system, that would be the opposite because you have a ball that moves inside of a beam. As you can see here, a half a turn is a noticeable change. It's also a noticeable change on the pressures of these things. Notoriously, when these are set up, 2 turns, either direction after initial setup, is about the most you go. So to set this system up, basically is got the rod ends as opposed to a clevis. When these go on, the key part to this is when they're set, thread the master push rod into the rod ends. And what I do initially is I'll put them all in there. I'll set the pedal equally to get the pedal where the driver's comfortable with. When you tighten it up, ensure you back this up to keep the monoball square. Tighten the jam nut. If you don't do that, it damages the rod end and will create problems down the road. Now, with this system, after you have all this set up and your driver's comfortable with the pedal position, there's 2 scenarios here. Pavement, racing, dirt racing. 2 different animals, as we both know. Running 2 master cylinders. On pavement racing, you're always going to run front percentage. Dirt racing is rear percentage. With that said, when everything is set up and we're dead even here at that point, this being a pavement setup that we're simulating, and this being the front master cylinder, I'm going to loosen the nut. These are equal right now, meaning the balance bar is square. This is the small master cylinder, because again, whether it's pavement or dirt, on a pavement application, the small master is always going to be to the front. On dirt, notoriously, the small master is going to be to the rear because that's what you're wanting to create the most pressure to induce some percentages balance. So what we'll do is, at that point, we're going to lengthen this. So I'll back the jam nut off, I got my flat, and I'm just going to count it. So basically 12 flats. 1. We're going to lock it down. At that point, you can see the balance bar now is crooked. What that does, though, is actually when you push the pedal now and it starts to get moderate pressure, when it goes in, the bar starts to square itself up because a small master is going to move further than a big one. So you're already inducing some front percentage right from the get-go is what you want. So ideally, you want the balance bar to be square, which you're at moderate brake pressure, which we're at now. The other key advantage to this, and probably one of the biggest advantages, and the setup on this is you can physically see where you're at all times. Like I said, mentioned earlier, the monoball, I'm exaggerating here, that is closest to the beam is going to be the end that gets the most pressure. So you actually know if you were sitting here looking at the car, oh my gosh, I've got more rear percentage because I can physically look at it. It's just, you cannot do that in any other system. So we're going to go back now. Now the other advantage to this is, everything's nice and free. You went out and run. You're happy with your setup. You're keeping notes, as you probably should. You can actually take this one and physically measure off the beam. There's a center point on the rod end. You can measure to the center. You could record that number. Oh, I've been happy with the balance there. That's where I want to start. Put it in your notes. Anytime you go back, you can just reset up to that number. It will come back 100% every time without guessing where you're at, on track, any other way. It's just a very, very useful tool. The other thing we'll talk about, since we're onto this, is actually the gauges and pressures. This is always one that comes up, and what's important if you're using a gauge, whether it's a gauge in a caliper, a gauge that's simulated in our tool here, is you always want to go to a constant number. And for me, and you can achieve this with any pedal ratio, I always like to go to 500. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my front, and again, this doesn't matter if it's a dirt car or pavement car. I just utilize the front because it's easier and it's easy to remember. So I'll push it down, and I'm going to push this down to simulate 500 pounds of pressure. So if you see that, I got 500 front, and I've got just a shade over 400 rear right now. Okay, I'm always going to go to 500. I'm going to let it off and I say, I want more rear percentage. One. I'm just going to go 2 turns rear. I'm always going to go to 500. I'm at 500. You can see now that I'm up basically 450. Now, a lot of this percentage difference will have it's a difference on master cylinder combination sizing with your calipers, but the 500 number is always going to get you back to a baseline as opposed to just pushing the thing arbitrarily and get a number because it'll be all over the board. It's like dyno in a shock. You always want to get a constant number each time, let off, make an adjustment, and go from there if you're using gauges. Okay, our Tru-Bar pedal, when we first introduced this thing approximately 4 years ago in just one pedal design, I don't think we really envisioned the scope and the magnitude this thing would go to and all the different forms of motorsports. Since then, I mean, it has become the benchmark in pedals for Wilwood disc brakes and in the racing applications. We now have a pedal in every application we build in this model, the Tru-Bar. If you have any particular questions, you can go to Wilwood Disc Brakes. We have a representative or people in charge for every type of motorsports out there racing that are specific to your needs. You reach out to them and they're going to tell you exactly what you need. And I hope this has been informative to you, and look forward to seeing you guys at the racetrack.